Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. We have more planes falling out of the sky. We have a massive amount of government corruption that's being explored and stopped. And we also have a record price in gold. Let's go ahead and get started. Overall for the week, the main thing that moved the markets and also that was in the news cycle, because the new administration it seems like it's moving at a breathtaking pace, so the news cycle can't catch up to everything that they're actually doing, is the situation with the tariffs. And it looks like, I might not be an expert, but what it looks like is he's not really looking to start a trade war with the tariffs, but he's looking to have a lot of countries bend the knee to the things that he wants, right? So this week he talked about putting a 25% tariff on Mexico and also Canada, 10% for China. And it looks like the tariffs from Mexico and China are going to be delayed for a month after President Trump talked to the president of Mexico, I should say the communist president of Mexico, and also the communist president of Canada from the Communist Republic of Canada. And basically what he wanted is, look, let's stop the drugs coming in from the border, stop the illegal immigrants. They both agreed to do a lot of things, set up task forces, send the military to the border, et cetera, et cetera. So it looks like it's going to stop for a month. And then we'll kind of maybe continue with more tariffs because they are so huge. They're going to be huge. So that looks to be what's happening. And so, and one of the things that's really interesting is, I got my conspiracy button. What seems to me that is happening is that the drugs are actually coming in from China, and they may be doing it on purpose to kind of damage the U.S. population and economy, because we're having a lot of deaths, especially from fentanyl. And so they send them to Canada and Mexico and then just, walk them across the border and then put them into the supply of everything. One of the things that was also interesting is that the U.S. Aid Department, which was done by an executive order from JFK, when the Doge investigation, the Department of Government Efficiency, which is being led by Elon Musk, found that the U.S. government, your tax dollars, if you're a U.S. citizen, was literally going to things like testing if frogs would be gay after giving them chemicals, and then how would they react to tasting things like Doritos, sending money to places like Colombia and Peru to have transgender operas, all kinds of things that we don't really need to be spending our money on, especially since we're in a debt crisis, essentially, in the United States. And another thing that was really interesting is that essentially this government department was subsidizing a lot of the news outlets, which kind of makes sense why they were going so hard against Trump, essentially. They're giving $8 million to Politico for subscriptions, New York Times, things like that. So I'm happy about what's happening due to the fact that I don't think our tax money should be going anywhere. And if there was ever one thing that you wanted to think about, is that it really doesn't matter if it's left or right. They're all in the same elite cabal group, right? What we have to focus on is the original goal of the United States was small government, personal freedom, essentially, right? A lot of wiggle room in there, but essentially. And so whenever you have big government, doesn't matter what side you're on, right? Left or right, blue or red, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. They're all corrupt, right? So that's why what we have to try to focus on is having a smaller government or a small government so we can keep our freedoms. And that's why it's written in the Constitution that anything that basically isn't laid out that's the federal government's responsibility is the state's responsibility. And probably a lot easier because we won't have so much corruption if we don't have so much of a centralized system, especially a large centralized system. So that's essentially what happened this week. Overall, the stock markets in the U.S., all negative. The Communist Republic of Canada was also negative. Overseas market news, the European markets were mostly higher. Spain was the biggest winner there. Latin America was mixed. The biggest market there, the Bovespa out of Brazil, was down 1.21%. Africa and the Middle East, mostly higher. And in the far, far east, we have the Philippines being the most positive, even though those markets were mostly mixed. Bitcoin oscillating quite a bit this week, especially with, if we have Trump saying he's going to put on a tariff and then the economy is not going to do well and then they're going to cancel it and then everything's going to be okay. It's been, a really seesaw situation for the markets. So Bitcoin down 5.90% this week at 96,161. The commodities and energy, oil, both international and Brent, were down over 2%. The dollar took a bit of a dip this week as well. I saw it especially in the Colombian peso. And dry weather has forced grains exchange in Argentina, which is the largest exporter of soy and meal. Meal's think of it like a grain. Number 3 exporter of corn, to cut forecasts for the current season. Pretty serious situation because the food prices are still kind of going up, right? We have that egg situation in the United States. But you should definitely, if you're able to work online, just down in Latin America or Asia, and you don't have any of these problems anymore. Strangely, there's only a bird flu epidemic in the United States. Funny how that works, huh? Gold hit a record high this week, over 2,900 for the week. It closed 2.13% to 2,861.10. Silver went up 1.62% to 31.89. And financial and banking news, last year, the EU countries spent an average of 1.9% of GDP on defense. Since 2021, that number is up by 30%, according to EU estimates. And Trump is saying that NATO European members should spend 5% of GDP. And, everybody's ramping up the military. Keep an eye on that. It may not be in the next year or two, but 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now, doesn't look like we're heading in a good direction. Bank of England cut its interest rates by 0.25%. They're at 4.5% due to the stagnant economy. Remember that even though they're not the largest economy in the world anymore, they're still a big player, right? We have the U.S., China, Germany, Japan, India, and if I'm not mistaken, the U.K. after that, number 6. After that, it's countries like France. I believe Canada's in there. Brazil's 11 or 12. Look at, for example, what corruption does. Brazil has 200 million plus people in their population, have a ginormous country, have all kinds of natural resources, and their economy is smaller than Canada's, which Canada, if I'm not mistaken, has 30-ish, 40 million people. Isn't that amazing? Economic news, factory activity in the United States expanded for the first time in over 2 years. New orders and production also posted gains. Job creation was weaker in the United States in January. The non-farm payrolls went to just 443,000 for the month, down from 307,000 in December. And political news, China said that it's starting an anti-monopoly investigation against Google. And in some of the corporate news, PayPal went down over 13% after they reported slower growth. Expedia exploded up by 17% after they had a lot better results than expected. Spotify, for the first time, made a profit of 1.14 billion US dollars. That's 1.18 billion euros because they're in Sweden. Their monthly active users went up by 12%, and Google fell by over 7% after they fell short the expectation of what their revenue was going to be. They said that they're going to spend another $75 billion to shove more AI down your throat. I don't know if you guys are tired of it, but everything, it's like, use my AI, use my AI. Revenues did grow over 12% more than a year ago. And in trade news, China's Commerce Ministry and Customs Administration said on Tuesday that it's going to start imposing export control on some rare earth metals. And also, the 10% duty China announced on electric trucks looks like could apply for future sales of Elon Musk's Cybertruck. So that could affect Tesla sales. And international events, Santorini, the picturesque, beautiful island of Santorini in Greece. Hundreds of people were looking to evacuate due to the fact that there's been hundreds of earthquakes in the area. The reason why Santorini looks like that, just so you know, is because it's a volcano. And one time it exploded and it literally took the side of the mountain off, and that's why you have such amazing picturesque views there. And Greenland's ruling Siumut party seeks to hold a vote on the independence following next month's election. So it's kind of funny how this works, because the tariffs, right, the way that the media, if you're still watching the mainstream news, is like, he's starting a trade war, he's going to hurt the economy, blah, blah, blah. And you can see how it kind of looks a little bit different, right? Especially when I explained it to you in the beginning of the video. The situation with Greenland is really interesting because, one, they have a lot of rare earth metals. And outside of the strategic area where they're at, because of the shipping lanes and also the military and everything, they got quite a bit of minerals. So Trump might be looking at that. And interesting facts, the rate at which the Earth's oceans are warming have increased by 4 times in the last 40 years. In the late 1980s, ocean temperatures were rising approximately 0.11 degrees Fahrenheit, 0.06 degrees Celsius. Today, it's at 0.48, so half a degree Fahrenheit. And in Celsius, it's 0.27. Global ocean temperatures hit a record high for 450 consecutive days in 2023 and 24. And some of it did come from El Nino, which is the warming situation that we have in the Pacific. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.